Hello, my name is Daniel Roberts, a volunteer at the Highline Heritage Museum, and you're listening to Highline Times History on KQWZ 106.5 FM. And I'm with Roger Price.
We're both here at the museum today. We're sitting in the radio booth of One America. Do a little recordings, and we're going to try to do an ongoing show, a series during the summertime.
And the hope of this program is to record some of the memories of a long-term resident of the Highline area, so that you guys can enjoy it now or years from now.
Okay, well, thank you, Daniel. Yes, KQWZ 106.5.
Thank you for listening, and enjoy the show.
Good afternoon, and I'm Roger Price, a volunteer here at the Highline Heritage Museum. And this afternoon, Daniel and I are going to talk a little bit about the Mosquito fleets of Puget Sound that probably ran up and down the Sound between the years of maybe 1860 to 19 whatever it was, 20, somewhere in there. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, there's so many vessels. I think that one time they figured there must have been close to 700 over that time frame that used to navigate different cities and towns along Puget Sound. And we kind of know that the very first navigation was canoe by the tribes that lived in Puget Sound back then. And canoe was just a hollowed out cedar log that they could travel up into rivers and inlets and different things back in the very early days of the 1870s, 80s, 90s. But Daniel, he's going to give us a little bit of his knowledge of some of the events that happened back then also. So go ahead, Daniel. And
Yeah, well, thank you, Roger. And yeah, it's just a little bit of reading I'd done on the Mosquito fleet, and it's a interesting little part of history. So the Mosquito fleet itself was several steamships and that operated as transportation in the Puget Sound area. And you were close on the timelines. It was from around the 1880s through the 1920s. And the first steamship did arrive in 1836, and that one was called the Beaver. It was built in London and it sailed over to the United States, and it was used for decades for carrying goods and people. But the ship was owned by the British, so the Americans, not surprisingly, wanted to have a ship of their own, and the first American steamship that arrived was called the Ferry, and it arrived in San Francisco in 1852. And its purpose was it was supposed to travel from Olympia to Steilacoom. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right.
yeah,
And it would go there on Mondays and Wednesdays. And on every Friday, it would also travel to Alki and Seattle. A one-way ticket to Steilacoom was $5, and for $5 more, that would get you to Alki and Seattle.
Alki.
Alki, okay. Whoop. There we go.
Yes.
I apologize for anyone from Alki. Not a local, as you can obviously tell. But apparently, the average time, or that at that time, like the average pay for a laborer per day was roughly $2 to $3. So those are some pretty pricey tickets. The ship, however, it blew up in 1857, and another ship named the Major Tompkins had arrived in 1854. But that one was crashed and destroyed in 1855, and yet another ship that came was the Traveler, and that came not long after the Tompkins, but that one sunk in 1858. So as you can tell, a lot of these ships did run into accidents.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, there were all different ships. There were stern wheelers and side wheelers and steam and coal. So everything, and then they had a propeller driven also as time went on. So there were, and they went along different areas from like Olympia to Tacoma, and then yeah, like you say, Silicon. Probably stopped in Redondo. Some ships may have Des Moines, and then across to Vashon Island, back to maybe a Tree Point or something. So it was depending on what the transportation was for that day or where it was going. You could get you'd eventually wind up probably in Seattle.
Oh yeah, and like you mentioned, they went all over the place. They basically went anywhere they wouldn't run aground, and so the rivers, lakes, coves, and inlets. Uh, from what I looked up, it wasn't known exactly how many ports there were, but there was at least 350, which included like Anderson Island, Bremerton, Gig Harbor, and a lot of the ones you'd mentioned. Uh, and some of the benefits of these ships was that it was said that they helped like create a community on the Puget Sound, as they could act as a sort of convenience store, gossip mill, and of course a transit system. And it meant that people that lived wherever along the shoreline or even inland were still connected to the larger communities and had access to goods and markets.
Oh, sure, yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of the reason behind all these different ships was that there weren't any roads back in those days. Actually, there might have been a road or two, but they just didn't have any roads or ways of getting around. There were cars weren't available at the time, so and the train there were no uh, train tracks also back then that went into these little communities. So they had to go by water, and that worked out pretty good. I know there was a Tree Point there back around just about 1902, three. There used to be people would come out from Seattle, wealthier people. They would come out by boat to Tree Point, and they would have summer cabins along the water and the bluffs there at Tree Point. And there was a couple of lagoons in there at the time. And also they built a pavilion there where you could hold dances. It was open air. It was a pretty good sized pavilion. And then if it did rain or wind or something, they could pull down some shades or some curtains and get a little protection. But I'm not quite sure. It was probably, I don't know exactly, but I think it was towards the end of the point there. And I don't know what year they actually tore it down. I don't think it lasted into the 20s at all, but we're 1920s. But yeah, that was a different reason for a lot of those people to come out from Seattle and have a vacation home out here at Tree Point.
Oh, for sure. And it's rewinding it a little bit before the Mosquito fleet had become a major thing, and probably one of the reasons that spurred other people on was the Eliza Anderson. It had come in 1859, and its run was from Olympia to Victoria. And what they do is they'd run mail as well as passengers, with it being $12 to get to Seattle and 20 to Victoria. And they'd also carry cattle, which was $15 per head and 250 per sheep. And according to the article I found this on, when it to give a comparison of this, a ticket from San Francisco to Portland was 50 or was $5 per cabin. So a lot more expensive up here, uh, which I guess some things never change. Uh, but a way that they managed to stay the sole competition for a while was whenever a competitor did arrive, they might drop down the cost as low as $1. And then once that competition gave up, they just ratcheted up again.
Oh, sure.
But like I said, the success of the Elza Anderson, or Liza Anderson, terrible names. And it's um, that brought on successors that was why the Mosquito fleet came into being. And a little side note of for the origins of the name for the Mosquito fleet, that's not exactly clear. Uh, one one of the claims is that it was from a newspaper that a reporter had written that at 5 o'clock in Seattle, the little commuter steamers scurry off to their destinations like a swarm of mosquitoes. Though apparently, no, there are no quotes been actually been able to be located in these local papers. And another early use of the term came from the Tacoma Daily Ledger on February 21st, 1889. And an unnamed author had written that the Mosquito Fleet's name is, or is very aptly applied from L.F. Cook to the swarms of small steamers that skim across the green waters of the Sound between Tacoma and numerous small ports. So, you know,
Little background on why it was called the Mosquito Fleet. Sure, that's great.
yeah, and I'd also read that the term mosquito fleet had been used in other points, in the War of 1812 and the Civil War. So it wasn't like it was just here, but from the Puget Sound specifically, sounds like there was a couple ideas of where it might have originated from.
I think back in the East Coast, it also was used then sometime.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned earlier, it was the 1880s to 1920s that was the peak time for the Mosquito fleet. And you had mentioned earlier that it was around 700, and that seems to be what I had read as well. It ranged from 700 to 2,500, though 2,500 is probably on the high side. But part of the reason that probably there could be so many ships is that the size of the ships were varied. They could be as small as 19 feet and as big as around 283 to 300 feet. Though apparently it was roughly around 90 feet was the average. And they could be made out of all sorts of things too: wood, steel, iron, and but what a common thing was that they had flat bottoms and shallow depths, which makes sense since they could more easily travel, especially through like rivers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, they didn't want to run aground because sometimes they get stuck there, and that's where they stayed until they uh, rotted away, I guess, at some point. Yeah.
Exactly. So like around 70% were like propeller driven, and the remainder generally were paddle wheelers. And from one author, what I'd written or read was that nearly 40% of the fleet was abandoned, burned, dismantled, exploded, sunk, scuttled, or wrecked. So a lot of them met their end one way or another.
Oh, uh-huh. Sure, yeah. Well, that's very interesting. That's good stuff.
Uh,
Uh, well,
yeah, and to kind of wrap it up, you had mentioned about why the Mosquito fleet was used was that there weren't very many cars available. And that's exactly the reason why the Mosquito fleet, disappeared. It was as cars and roads started to spread through the sound, the Mosquito fleet slowly just disappeared. Is it was just kind of described that people didn't even notice it slowly disappearing. It was just one day they took out a look out in the sound and there are no more boats out there. Uh, Something that I found interesting though is that there are two of these Mosquito fleet vessels that have survived.
oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, there is the Carly S2, which is a 65-foot ship built in 1928, and it sometimes still operates between Bremerton and Port Orchard, and from what I read, acts as a floating museum of sorts. And then there's the Virginia V or 5. I'm not sure
Yeah, the
how
Virginia Five. Yes,
Virginia
that's
5.
it. Hmm.
Great, and yeah, that started as a ferry in 1922 between Tacoma and Seattle, and it operated until 1968. It's now listed as a National Register of Historic Places, and you can still find it at Seattle's Lake Union.
Oh, yes. I have a story. I went on the Virginia Five. It was, I think it was a New Year's party, and this happened about 19. I gotta believe it was around 1979, 80. And some friends of mine and we had tickets to go on this Virginia 5. And we met down at Ballard and we took off from there. It was moored there. And we went up through the Ship Canal. And we went to the Lake Union and then we went on out to Lake Washington. And uh, we had some kegs of beer on board because it was New Year's and everybody was going to celebrate and have a good time. But yeah, that was a fun time. I think that Virginia 5 has been around for many years and it's still in existence to this day, I believe. So it's probably still down there, ready to be rented down at the Ballard area there. So I had a lot of fun that night.
Yeah, that does track. From what I read, they still open themselves for events and such. So it's pretty cool that while it's not doing the same thing it necessarily was doing back 100 years ago, or I guess 1968, it still is in operation. And it's still cool that you can find some of these old boats around to this day.
Yeah, well, that's good that they preserved them, and there's still a few around to observe and see. So that's very interesting. There's a lot of history in Puget Sound, so that's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, was there anything else you wanted to talk about the fleet today?
Well, I think that might be about it for this. Maybe next time we'll talk about something different. It could even be the different, we could mention the bootlegging that went along in Puget Sound from, during Prohibition and back in those days also, hillsides and different areas in Puget Seahurst and Three Tree Point. There were plenty of places to stash your your booze and come along and shuffle it on somewhere else. So maybe that'll be an interesting topic too. But yeah, this was a good fun time. Uh, so we'll go from there.
For sure. And I definitely should read up on that, and I'll definitely like to hear about what you've learned about that. So until next time, folks, I hope you enjoyed our show, and I hope you'll come back.
Okay, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Roger.